Welcome to Stoughton Spotlight. I'm your host, Jeffrey Pickette. We'll be discussing some big news about Stoughton High on our very first episode. The Massachusetts School Building Authority voted on Wednesday, January 29th, to invite Stoughton High into its eligibility period. There won't be any groundbreaking tomorrow at Stoughton High School, but this is an important first step in renovating or replacing the school. We'll be joined in studio by Town Manager Michael Hartman, Superintendent Maggie Rizzi, School Committee Chair Joyce Hussaini, School Committee Member Deborah Sovany, Stoughton High Principal Julie Miller, and State Senator Brian A. Joyce to discuss the news. Selectman Chair John Anzavino will join us later in the program. Let's start the show with our roundtable. We have Senator Brian A. Joyce, Principal of Stoughton High School Julie Miller, Stoughton School Committee Member Deborah Sovany, Stoughton School Committee Chair Joyce Hussaini, Stoughton Superintendent Dr. Marguerite Rizzi, and the Stoughton Town Manager Michael Hartman. Thank you everybody for joining us. We'll be joined later in this episode by Stoughton Board of Selectmen Chairman John Anzavino. So, you got the good news officially Wednesday morning from the Massachusetts School Building Authority. You're invited into the eligibility period. What exactly does that mean?
Well, what it means is that we have 270 days to complete a series of requirements. The big thing was actually getting on the agenda. And once we got on the agenda, and we only would have gotten on there because Senator Joyce and Representatives Kafka and Galvin advocated for us. But now that we got on the agenda and were voted into the process, there are a number of requirements, one of which is to form a school building committee.
And so you have to form the school building committee. Is it safe to say that you're in the lobby, you're in the door, and you kind of have to make your way now to the elevator? Is that kind of a good analogy to get to the boardroom?
So let me say they're at first base. So here's the situation. You have 351 cities and towns in the state, and each with multiple school buildings. And they're all competing for this significant sum of money, trying to get the state to invest tens of millions of dollars into their own community. And Stoughton has this high school that was built in 1923, has an extraordinarily dedicated, led by these two school committee members. The principal does great work there, but the facility is somewhat dilapidated. And so the superintendent, the school committee, really focused on trying to get to first base, we call it, with the school building authority. And after they had done their due diligence, initially they weren't going to invite Stoughton in to this eligibility, to get the process going. They felt there were other towns that had perhaps greater needs and higher priority. So Lou, Bill, and I got involved, and we worked very closely with Deborah, with Joyce, with the superintendent, and we were delighted today on Wednesday morning to get the announcement that we were successful, that we're at first base. We now have 270 days to expedite this process, really ramp it up. It's a collaborative effort, the state and the voters and taxpayers in Stoughton, to ultimately end up with a first-class, world-class high school that will be an extraordinary resource for the entire community, not just for the school, will enhance the property values, will save the town tens of millions of dollars. It really is good news. The hard work has just begun, but we are now on base, rounding first, and we hope to, finally cross the plate with a brand new, beautiful, world-class Stoughton High School.
Well, explain the steps to get from first base to home. There's, of course, the feasibility study, and there are other important steps along the way. So what are some steps that the residents can expect down the road in the coming months and years?
The feasibility study will be the next phase, and we were very fortunate last year to have the people of town meeting vote the money, $1 million, for the feasibility study. And
is that vote still valid?
Yes. So the statement they were making by that vote is that A, they were in favor of going forward, and B, they wanted us to have the money safely set aside for the moment that we could start. And that puts us in a very good position because some towns after they're invited in, they have to go through the process of getting the money for the feasibility study. But that piece is key to telling us what's going to happen next, because that's where we'll get the analysis of, do we want a brand new building? Do we want to renovate the building? Are we going to have different location choices and so on? And so what it is that we can choose to do will come out of that study. And then at that point, we need to look at, okay, we'll choose an option from the things that are on the table, and that's when the building would begin.
So certainly no shovels are coming to a building tomorrow, no bricks are being taken away. It is an extensive process. A lot, of course, has been talked about in the months since you've submitted statements of interest for Stoughton High School about the condition of the building. But if you could just kind of briefly talk about, I'll direct this question to Julie, about what the building, the condition of the building. You have the unique perspective of being both a student in the school, a teacher in the school, and now you're the principal of the school. So just kind of describe the condition of Stoughton High School and why it needs to be updated.
Yeah, definitely. I think that when our high school students come into the building, we do an excellent job with what we have. They get an excellent education. But our faculty and our students have to make do with what we have. They have to make adjustments to their lessons and their instructions based on the facility, not based on student need. So we have physics classes that compete with one another in the sense that one's in a physics lab and one's in a regular classroom. One can do some very extensive experiments, one can only read about it. We have the same disparity in our chemistry labs, our biology classrooms. We have electrical issues, so if we plug in too many hot plates, the electricity blows. We have classrooms that are extraordinarily hot and extraordinarily cold. Our heating system doesn't work all that well. Should it rain, it tends to rain in the building as well. We have some places where there are leaks.
Especially guidance.
Especially guidance. They've had to rip up the carpeting in those offices due to the water. Sometimes those programmings have to be moved out of that area, so if there's been college visits scheduled or conferences or workshops, those all have to be relocated. So the challenges are many, and it would be wonderful for our residents, for our parents, for our students, for our faculty, for the administration to be able to come to school and focus on what's important and not be distracted by the facility. For me to be able to do the important work of a principal and the teachers to be able to do the important work of the educators and not have to worry about the leaking roof or the failing heating system or the elevator that decided not to work this morning. So to be able to focus on what's important and leave those other distractions outside.
Well, in the next 270 days, and then of course the months and years ahead before a new or renovated Stoughton High School is open, you're going to have to make do with the building that you currently have. So how will that be done? Is Stoughton High School in its current state viable for another 2, 3, 5 years?
Our maintenance staff and our facilities crew, they do a phenomenal job with our grounds and our building, and they keep it in the condition that it's in right now. And I think because they do such a good job, it almost has put us in this tough fight to get to where we are today, because it looks from the outside like it's a thriving building. I think that we'll continue to patch those leaks and repair the roof and do everything that we need to, and the building will remain a safe building from now until we can be in a place that is a top-notch facility.
And I think that raises an interesting point, though, as they continue to patch together the existing building, the cost of maintaining that building to the taxpayers would actually exceed the investment the taxpayers are going to make in a new building. Because we're looking at a partnership from the state that could pay anywhere from 50 to 65% of the cost of this building, depending upon a number of variables. And the local Stoughton property taxpayers' investment is likely, almost certainly, going to be less than the cost would be to continue to maintain this 1923 structure.
And so, Senator Joyce, you've been through this process before in your town of Milton. And so how did that process go? And can you just talk about how that impacted that community?
Well, I'm going through it right now in a number of communities I represent, both in East and West Bridgewater. We have new high schools under construction. In Easton, we recently, or relatively recently, opened a new high school and renovated existing schools, as well in Sharon and Canton. In my hometown of Milton, it was not too dissimilar from Stoughton. We were at a crossroads, and what was happening was young people were choosing to raise their families in other communities, and I really did feel as though the community was at a crossroads, like what we saw in Stoughton. The local taxpayers rallied together. We were successful in getting an extraordinary amount of state assistance, and we got not just one, we rebuilt all 6 schools in town, 6 brand new schools, and it changed the history of the town forever. There were 3 towns in my district that were rated by a national, I think it was CNN Money magazine, among the top places in the country to raise a family. Milton was number 2 one year. Sharon was also noted, and as was Easton. To me, it was not a coincidence. Those were the towns that had just invested in new schools that attracted young families, and whether you have children in the schools or not, it lifts your property values, and it acts as a community center and really an economic stimulus to help revitalize. I think we can't look at this only in a silo. We're going to see some other terrific things happening in Stoughton in the years to come. We're looking at a revitalization of downtown Stoughton. We're grappling with whether or not the state's going to extend the Fall River New Bedford line. But my job, irrespective of what that decision, what the state does ultimately has to benefit the town of Stoughton. And I think we have a number of good things happening. I think this new high school is going to be the single impetus for a lot of other great things.
And kind of along with the motto, if at first you don't succeed, try again, the statement of interest was not successful the first time around when you submitted it towards I believe that was the end of 2011. You heard back at the end of 2012 that in fact you were not accepted into the eligibility period. You submitted again in 2013 and got good news at the beginning of 2014. So what kind of changed from your approach? I noticed a different approach this time around with the statement of interest process, a more aggressive approach, if you will. So just to describe, your approach this time around.
Well, the first time around, I think we looked at the process of having to fill out a form. And we filled it out truly to the best of our abilities. We followed the rules. We looked at other SOIs, not really, I think, realizing exactly all that had to go on behind the scenes to supplement that. And we did get a senior site study, which was a visit from the MSBA to evaluate the building. So it was taken seriously, our application process the first time. But when we got the results of that senior site study, nearly at the end of the close of that SOI period, we realized that there are a lot of pieces of misinformation, or things that weren't represented well. The number of science labs versus the number of science classrooms. They took our plans and when it said science, they called it a lab. Where we had 13 or 14 classrooms, we really only had 2 or 3 functioning labs. And so the second time around for us was a chance to go through and really reinforce the message and focus on what it was that we weren't portraying in the best accuracy. And then also involving the political machine behind this, because it's state money, it's a state process, and I think I certainly was a little naive as to what the process was in terms of having to call in all the players and rally the troops, and also mobilizing the residents of Stoughton, getting their support and expressing that support to the legislators.
So the role of a legislator, there are 3 essential functions. One is to vote on the grand societal measures that impact everybody in the Commonwealth. Second is to advocate for your district. And third is to respond to the 170,000 constituents for their personal needs. This was squarely right in the second, the advocacy for our district. So working with Lou and Bill Galvin, Lou Kafka, the state representatives, and myself, the statement of interest is one thing that the School Building Authority looks at. There's also a requirement of due diligence on the part of this entity. So we got them with really, Joyce and Deborah dragged us out and led the way, and she's tougher than she looks. and so we got these folks out to see firsthand what Julie was talking about, to see firsthand the impact of not being accessible for persons with disabilities, not being able to have more than one class in the library at a time, and also to see the extraordinary support. You're going to have John from the Board of Selectmen. TJ Recupero was all over me to see the support from the town, the community. I think that weighed heavily to bring them out firsthand, show them what was up, and then I'm going to ask you to put a picture up on a screen, because there was something else. When they really pulled out the nuclear weapon, they had us all go over to the South School, and they had every child from the kindergarten through the 5th grade had a handwritten letter to us. And this girl that I hope you'll be able to pull up on the screen, Erin Fallon, looked me in the eye and said, "Will I go to a new high school?" So we answered yes, and so we're hopeful that she will be, in fact, classes before her will be graduating from a brand new Stoughton High School.
Well, that's a perfect segue into when, realistically, if everything goes smoothly, could a renovated or new Stoughton High School be in the works? 9th graders right now at Stoughton High School, probably not. But are the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders in the schools across Stoughton, are they looking at being in a new building?
I think that we can be optimistic in that the feasibility study will take about a year. I think since we already have town meeting has appropriated the money for it, I think we could start that off actually
Right away.
within 6 months or so. I'm hoping. Then we'll need about a year for a feasibility study to look at what the options are, and then to have a conversation as a town about what would be the most cost-effective way to go. And then it's usually about 2 or 3 years to actually construct a new high school.
And logistically, it's a challenge, because you have to continue to educate the children that are in the high school. But to me, it's more important to do it right, and to do it cost effectively, and to protect the taxpayers' hard-earned money, and make sure it comes in on time, on budget, than to try to, sometimes haste makes waste. But I think Deborah's correct. I think that those middle school and certainly those elementary school students should be looking at a new high school.
And is this safe to say this is a once in a generation, and in the case of Stoughton, a once in a lifetime opportunity to kind of replace the school?
Well, I hope not once in a lifetime. But it's funny. I graduated from a brand new high school, and 20 years later, my town was fortunate enough to fund another brand new high school, partly because of growth, and it was in the Midwest. As Dr. Rizzi mentioned, buildings have a life cycle, and people don't like to hear it, but life cycles are not the 90 years that the A building is. They're probably closer to 50 or 60 years. So, is that it's more than a generation? I guess it is. For some of us, it'll be the once in a lifetime opportunity. But
I think we have an opportunity to go forward. I feel like the town is at a crossroads right now, and we can't be still, because we have to look at the towns around us as competitors. In a way, competitors for residents, competitors for young families, competitors for businesses. And if what they have is more appealing than what we have, then Stoughton is going to be left behind.
Well, and I think I'd also like to add to that, we need our educational facilities to reflect today's standards of industry, today's standards of education. You don't want to be educating children in science labs that lack the basic equipment and have equipment, from basically the 1960s, when the jobs that they have the opportunities to get would look very different. So we'll make those changes as we need to make those changes.
You're exactly right. These children that are going to be graduating from the new Stoughton High School, those that graduated when the high school opened in 1923 may have been competing with high school graduates from Brockton for positions. These children could be competing with children from Lahore, Bangladesh. It's a global economy, and we need to prepare our kids to compete in that global economy. And with respect to the maintenance of the building, one of the things that this state assistance, it comes with some safeguards for the taxpayers, and there has to be a built-in maintenance plan. There are requirements in terms of energy efficiency. There are requirements, there are really best practices that we've developed from assisting with schools across the state, which will, again, in the long term, serve the taxpayers well, but ensure that the building is well constructed and will continue to be well maintained.
And we'll get into this more in the next segment, but how does the town play a central role in this whole process? Because obviously the schools kind of spearheaded the push, but how does the town factor in, the municipal side of the government?
Ultimately, it's the town that built the school. And the school committee and the Board of Selectmen are of one mind on something needs to be done with the high school. They've had a couple of joint meetings, and the school committee is likely to have the Board of Selectmen's support for going forward for an article for building the school and an article for doing a debt exclusion when the time comes.
And you had mentioned, Joyce, that the life cycle of a building, and Superintendent, you also mentioned that. There are many buildings in the Stoughton Public Schools which are nearing the end of that life cycle. One of them is the South Elementary School, and a statement of interest was submitted for that school 2 consecutive years. What is the status of that statement of interest, and what's the town prepared to do with the South Elementary School?
Well, the status of the statement of interest for the South School is that it wasn't highlighted as a priority school. We only had the opportunity to focus on one statement of interest, although we submitted 2. So we had chosen the high school as our priority school. The South clearly moves up in priority at this point. I'm on the facility committee. We do know that the South School, when it comes to pure physical need, had much more dire circumstances in terms of wanting to replace certain systems. I think we're pretty confident, and based on some of the feedback that we got from the MSBA, that is a building that was rated 3. A couple of years ago, they went through and did a 1 through 4 rating. They have since replaced all level 4 schools, or those schools have been closed. They've given the town basically the opportunity. And the South School is rated a level 3. And that indicates, based on their own study, that it is a building in need of replacement. So we will be bringing it up at a future school committee, joint school committee selectmen's meeting, to repopulate that statement of interest and move that one forward potentially this year.
And just to kind of conclude this segment, to rehash, just what does this particular vote this morning, just mean for the town, for Stoughton High School, to have, as Senator Joyce put it, to be at first base now in a single, double away from scoring and getting a new or renovated high school?
Well, I think it certainly says a lot about how the town has come together and values their education, values the education of their children. And I think that is just such a key thing. The entire town supported this effort, and it's something that all the residents should be really proud of. The students that developed petitions, and all the people that sent letters and emails and phone calls, and really came out to support this effort. I think that alone kind of brings people together, and also says that the education of our children is really important. It's key, in fact.
Well,
G.K. Chesterton said that education is simply the soul of society passing from one generation to another. And there really is, just as we have a moral obligation to our parents and grandparents, we have an intergenerational responsibility to our children to provide them with world-class facilities that will inure to the benefit of all townspeople. But this is a very exciting moment in the history of Stoughton.
Yeah. Once in a generation.
Right, maybe, hopefully more than once in a lifetime. You had mentioned the impact of, actually many people on the panel mentioned the impact of the community in this whole process. How can the public be involved in the next steps of this process? What are some ways that the public can continue being engaged in the construction or planning for a new Stoughton High School?
Well, I mean, I'll just jump in at several points in our next process, our feasibility stage. There are built-in public meetings, public presentations, public input, and at every step of the way there's opportunities for input, and there are requirements for participation in terms of voting. So whether it's a town meeting vote or a general vote that needs to happen, we really want everybody to turn out for these public meetings and to hear the voices of the community, much as they have for the master plan, and we have a master plan meeting again this afternoon. It's coupled with that type of energy that seems to be invigorated around making Stoughton a better place, that I think the schools and the master plan will really rejuvenate the economics vitality of this town.
All right, well, again, I want to thank everybody for joining us. We'll be right back on Stoughton Spotlight. So the schools got some positive news from the MSBA. But how much will a new or renovated Stoughton High cost? Selectman Chair John Anzavino joins us in our next segment to discuss how the town might fund a project which will cost tens of millions of dollars. So welcome back, joined again by the panel, and would like to talk about, after getting the good news, how do we pay for it? So it's kind of the $1 million question, and the final answer will cost a lot more than that. So how will the town pay for the potential either renovation or rebuilding of Stoughton High School, especially given that the library and the fire station and potentially other buildings are also on the docket to be renovated or replaced?
Well, from my standpoint, the only way we can finance these type of endeavors is going to be through, not through the overrides. We're going to have to do a debt exclusion. At least a debt exclusion can be limited to a finite period of time, and it's for a specific purpose, as opposed to an override which stays forever. So to me, that's the only way we could be going at this. We've only got a few million put away in the rainy day fund, and we started the building fund last year. So not enough to take a project like this on. The library you mentioned has already been voted and is going to be in part of the operating budget, which is going to be a tough nut to crack as it is. So it's something we're going to have to look at long range, and that's what we've been talking about, trying to plan for all the buildings in town and what we might need to do. But with this one being up right now, that would be my suggestion.
Yeah,
Michael?
realistically, minus any reimbursement we may receive for the state for the school buildings, because there is no reimbursement from the state for municipal buildings. We're looking at adding somewhere in the vicinity of $125 million of debt in the next 10 years. And what the town needs to be looking at as an organization, the school committee, the board of selectmen, the committee on finance and taxation, and the town meeting, is how are we going to pay for that? And John's right, the only way we're going to be able to afford to pay for that is through a series of debt exclusions. We're already going to have some difficulty in the early years in financing the library, which was done outside of 2.5. And we're just not in a position, or excuse me, done inside of 2.5. We're not in a position to do anything else outside of 2.5. Because the library debt will run for 20 years, and we will be paying that bill within the 2.5 for the next 20 years.
And of course, the Proposition 2.5, you're only allowed to increase the tax rate 2.5% per year. Do you mind just describing or explaining rather the difference between what an override is and a debt exclusion, and how you would go about getting a debt exclusion?
Go ahead, Michael.
First off, it would have to go through town meeting. With town meeting's approval, the selectmen would then place either one on a warrant, and it would be done on a ballot from the voters at a time decided by the board of selectmen. They would determine when it went. And it would require a simple majority vote for an override or a debt exclusion, and in the case of an override, you're talking about a permanent change that is going to stay with you forever. And in the case of a debt exclusion, you're talking about something that will stay with you until the debt is paid off. So a debt on the high school of 20 years, for example, would mean that after 20 years, that additional portion of taxation would go away.
And that's also coupled in with the library and the fire
Again,
station.
no.
You're going to be doing
The library's
separate
being done
outside of it.
no, inside of it.
Inside of it.
In other words, the library is not subject to a debt exclusion. It's very difficult to do a debt exclusion after the fact, and this would have to be a debt exclusion after the fact. So we're going to proceed with the library. In fact, we're expecting probably we'll hear something within the next 6 months, because they've moved up very near the top of the list. So we will proceed with that. But from here on out, it's simply not sustainable inside 2.5 to build anything else, whether it's a fire station or a high school or an elementary school. It's just not feasible.
And assuming that things go smoothly, now that the Stoughton Public Schools and Stoughton High School specifically is in the eligibility period, when might voters expect or residents expect to see the either override or what you were saying, debt exclusion on the ballot?
Well,
Certainly not this election.
I'm not sure how, I mean, what was it, 2 years ago, or back in 2012, we appropriated at town meeting $1 million to do the study. The study is supposed to look at the school, the deficiencies, and come up with a plan to either renovate or replace it. I'm not sure how long it's going to take them to do that process. So until you find out what their plan would be and have a cost to it, you have to wait for that before you'd go any farther, because you'd have to be able to set up your ballot question and so forth, and the town meeting warrant would have to be set for whatever the results are from the study. So
You're
you're probably talking 2 years out anyway.
Yeah, the 2016 annual town meeting at the absolute earliest, and that would be if the feasibility study was done very quickly. I think more likely you're looking at either the 2017 annual or a special sometime during late 2016.
Which is a good thing as far as, depending on the timing, the selectmen always have that ability to call for a special if there's a purpose to have one that can be done.
Now, could some potential economic development in other ends of town, specifically Park Street Sewer, a project of that magnitude, impact the amount of debt exclusion if there's more revenues coming into the town? Could this kind of all symbiotically work to offset costs, potentially?
Take that one.
Well, I mean, obviously the revenue comes in, you could
The
spend it.
revenue comes in, but the problem is the Park Street sewer has to be paid for.
Sure.
And one of the decisions the board's going to have to make is how we finance the Park Street sewer. So that has not been determined, and until it is determined, we won't know the impact, if any, it would have on other debt. But if it's all paid for by the sewer fund, then it's not going to impact our ability to borrow, because funds that are borrowed either through revenue bonds or through enterprise fund bonds, and the sewer is an enterprise fund, they're exempt from the bond cap under state law. There is a bonding cap. But if you have a dedicated revenue stream, then those bonds are exempt.
And just before we end this segment, probably should have asked this at the top. Well, how much are we talking about in terms of dollar amount for the high school and the reimbursement rate? And if you could explain the reimbursement a little bit and how that works with the MSBA.
Well, in the case, the MSBA looks at every community and has a formula to determine what the reimbursement rate will be for that community based on demographics and population and so on. And right now, Stoughton's is about 56%. And they reimburse only the school. So certain things around the school, or additional things such as if we were to put our central office attached to the high school, the way it is attached to the current high school, there are certain pieces that they wouldn't reimburse. So we're looking at them paying over 50%. We can get additional reimbursement for doing things like either a model school, so using a design that's already been used, or for doing certain green features that will be kinder to the planet and or save energy. So we can get the reimbursement rate up, but it will only be for the portion of the project that is the actual building. And then the town is going to have to figure out how to pay for the portion of the school that isn't reimbursed, plus whatever things are, and there are things that are necessary, but will not be considered as part of what they will reimburse.
Like the athletic fields.
Right. And as you mentioned, the central offices. And so are we talking 70 million? Is that a rough, 75 million, a rough figure, obviously before the cost of reimbursement?
So what I want to say is that the first thing that will happen is after the feasibility study, we'll look at various options to meet our programmatic and facility needs. In the case of Norwood, which opened in 2012, there were 8 different options that had various kind of mixtures of building, rebuilding, renovating. If we do end up with the most cost-effective solution being a new high school, the figure that I have been told was about 80 million. Norwood High School cost in the high 60s, and
that was a number of years ago.
Well,
of course,
yes, exactly.
By the time that Stoughton High
Right,
would be built.
right.
I would like to add, though, Jeffrey, that sounds like a really big number. And for anybody, it is a big number. But we have to look at it in the context of every building has a natural life, and many buildings get used past what would be their expected life. And all towns and all generations and people have to, at some point, come to grips with the fact that the infrastructure needs to be renewed if a place is going to remain livable. And there hasn't been a building of a school in Stoughton since 1970. So we're about a generation behind in what would be considered to be an appropriate replacement cycle. So this cost is coming, and the longer we wait, the more the costs go up. And the cost itself is never going to be escapable unless people are willing to just decide that the town will fall around us, and at some point the decision's going to have to be made. So it's an inevitable thing to wrestle with, and we're having the opportunity to be the ones to wrestle with it now.
Thank you to all of our panelists, and we'll be right back on Stoughton Spotlight. And finally, we end this program with some closing thoughts from our panel. We're joined again by State Senator Sen Joyce, along with the rest of the panel. Let's start with you, Senator Joyce.
Well, I've had the pleasure of representing Stoughton in the Massachusetts Senate since 2002. I have never seen a single issue that has rallied such extraordinarily broad and diverse community support. I think this is an incredible opportunity for the town to have a brand new high school that its children can thrive in and the town can take pride in. And I'm delighted that, along with Representative Bill Galvin, Representative Lou Kafka, to have played a part in assisting the decision to have the state participate and pay at least half so as to keep the burden off the local property taxpayers and make this investment one that the overwhelming majority of voters, I'm hopeful, will support.
Well, I would say that I have been closely linked to this community. I graduated from Stoughton High School. My parents graduated from Stoughton High School. And I'm very proud of this community, and I'm proud of the direction that we're heading, and the opportunity to have a new building where we can continue to grow and flourish and give our students what they truly deserve is very exciting. I'm very grateful for the support that we received from our legislation, from our school committee who spearheaded this, from the superintendent, and from our town representatives and selectmen. And I'm also really proud of our students because during this round of the Statement of Interest, they really were empowered to get out there and campaign, learn about a little politics on their own, get out the good word. They were writing letters themselves. They helped me get signatures to flood the offices at legislation, and I'm really proud of them, and I continue to be really proud of them, and I know that they're going to do great things, and with a new building, it'll be even better.
And I want to encourage the people who participated up until this point to continue to participate, because we're going to need your help and input as we go forward. And again, this never could have happened without the help of our legislators, never could have happened. And also the Board of Selectmen, town meeting members, FinCom, school committee, school administration, everyone pulled together for this, and I think it's a great statement about the town. We're going to need to stay pulled together, and we still have a lot of work to do. But this is a great day.
This is a great day, and you know, the schools are so much more than about educating our children from kindergarten through grade 12. They are a tremendous community resource. And if you drive by the high school any night of the week, you'll see that it is a buzzing building. It is alive. There are all sorts of community activities that go on there. We really look forward with this vote from the MSBA to be able to provide an even better town resource, something that is a great centerpiece for this town, for all of the citizens. Again, love to thank everybody who's represented at this table, and the parents and the residents and the children and our legislators. It's been a real growth process for all of us involved, and you know, we know we have a tremendous amount of hard work ahead of us. I don't think we can comprehend what we have ahead of us, but for now we'll celebrate this victory shortly, and then roll up our sleeves and start the hard work for the next steps.
I think this is a very, very, very exciting time to be a part of the town of Stoughton, or to be a resident in the town of Stoughton, because this effort, which has culminated in being invited into this process and beginning the process for a new high school, is related to all of the other things that are going on in the town. So we've watched the master planning process just really take root, and people are very, very excited about that, and looking at all of the things that can happen in Stoughton, and a big spark to set all of that in motion with all of the energy focused in that direction. I think that we're just going to watch amazing things that we create come into fruition in the next few years, and it's really, really exciting for our kids to be able to see that and for all of us to be a part of it. And I have to say, I had a unique perspective. This has become a tremendous effort, but really it was Mrs. Sovany who took the ball when it was just really tiny and decided to push it down the hill, and no one was listening, no one was watching, and from that tiny beginning we've gotten to this point, and that's just really been something to watch.
I'm so glad that you said that. I'm so glad that you said that, and I wanted to mention really both of you. Look at she. So Joyce, did I tell you she cries?
Yes,
and here's
really?
the difference. Here's the difference with these two gentle ladies and the rest of us, is that we're paid. I'm paid to do my job, to represent, and these are two volunteers who have given of their time and their talent to make this an even better community. So, and your own children are not going to be able to benefit from this.
That's right.
But generations of others
right,
will. So,
yeah.
thank you to you two.
Thank you.
I just want to echo, it has been a group effort. It will continue to be a group effort. Traditionally, this has been a great place to live and raise a family, and this will just enhance that even further, because there's nothing more important to young families than the town's educational system.
And if I could just add one thing and quote the late Ann Richards, who was a Texas politician, and we do amazing things with the facilities that we have. It's really astounding. And when we have spectacular facilities, there's just really no end to the possible things that we can do. And one of the things that she said is, Ginger Rogers does everything Fred Astaire does, only backwards and in high heels. So we won't have to be going backwards and in high heels anymore. So watch out, world,
Yes,
because
there
we're
you go.
coming.
Thank you again to all of our guests who joined us today for an insightful conversation about what's in store for Stoughton High School and its building project. This has been the first episode of Stoughton Spotlight. I'm Jeffrey Pickette, and we will see you next time.